Greeks to the Romans, lived and died by their innovations in naval technology. And perhaps the most lethal of all such inventions came not from the West, but the East. South Korea is a glittering jewel of Eastern Asia. Yet for centuries, it's been a target for invasion by its two monster neighbors, China and Japan. Japan was home to some of the most ferocious soldiers in history, the samurai warriors. And China had the largest standing army in all antiquity. Korea stood at a crossroads, surrounded by two aggressive superpowers. To defend their shores, the small and vulnerable nation of Korea was forced to turn to technology to survive.
In the later Korean Dynasty, the development of science meant we had advanced military technology.
In 1591, the Koreans developed a vessel that would become known as the Turtle Ship. Within 6 months, Turtle Ship crews were being trained for a conflict that would become known as the Imjin War. It pitted Korea against a Japanese force more than 3 times greater in number.
At the time of the Imjin War, 6 gun ports were installed on each side of the ship, and a gun port at each side of the Dragon's Head.
These cannons could unleash barrages of ballistic missiles.
You might imagine that blasting powder balls were used in the cannons, but in the early ages, wooden arrows with iron wings were used. The wooden arrows were 6 feet long and designed to make a huge hole in the enemy ships. And the secret behind the weapon's potency was that iron wings were attached to make the arrow more deadly.
These ship-to-ship missiles struck at speeds of over 200 miles per hour. The secret of their power lay in a pioneering design developed by Korean engineers. With its superior firepower, the Turtle Ship was able to demolish Japanese targets at long range, safe from counterattack, just as aircraft carriers do in the 21st century. In spite of the lethal firepower of the Turtle Ship, the Koreans were facing a superior force. If the enemy survived the first attack and managed to get in close, the ships and the battle might be lost. The Korean military engineers were forced to invent a contingency strategy. Unbelievably, the solution was to convert the Turtle Ship into a mobile floating tank. The War Museum in Seoul, Korea. Here, one of these extraordinary battleships has been reconstructed.
The Turtle Ship deserves to be compared to a tank because it acted as a ramming ship. Its primary role was breaking through enemy lines and destroying their front line of ships. Then the rest of the Korean fleet struck forward.
The ship was designed to act as a battering ram. 400 tons of boat powered by 80 oarsmen would crash into enemy ships. But in order to withstand such collisions, its design was critical. The ship's crew and rowers were shielded inside the vessel. Outside, the Turtle Ship was clad in iron plating. And these spikes were not just for decoration.
Japanese ships would approach the Korean ships at high speed, and the Japanese would jump on the deck to kill the Korean soldiers. This was because their ships were much higher in the water. In order to prevent this happening, spikes were nailed to the roof.
Each plate carried a 2-foot spike that would impale enemy invaders who dared to attempt a boarding. The Turtle Ship had become a giant cactus. But the spikes were not its only defense. Mounted on the front of the destroyer were the gaping jaws of a majestic dragon, yet this was no decorative figurehead. Ancient stories claim that contained within its mouth was a deadly secret weapon.
The front part of the turtle ship was designed as a dragon head with a mouth which served as a gun port, and a small cannon of mythical power was placed there. A projector was also installed that could release dense toxic smoke generated by burning a mixture of sulfur and saltpeter.
The dragon head was an early chemical weapon. It had the potential to deliver poison gas at an enemy. This predated the use of mustard gas in World War I by more than 300 years and began the technology of chemical warfare, a terrifying military option to this day. But poison gas is only effective if the soldier can direct it at the enemy, away from his own troops. Richard Windley is an historian and one of the world's leading model makers. He's fascinated by stories that the Koreans had mastered the ability to deliver chemical gas to their enemies. He's constructed a replica of the dragon's head. He's about to test the effectiveness of the delivery system.
If we think about the use of gas, say, in the First World War, obviously it was a very, very dangerous technique. It only needed the wind to change, and the gas could actually affect the people who were trying to deploy it rather than the enemy. So it is a risky stratagem. Right, I've got one of the little chargers here. I'm going to light this, pop him in the pot, put the lid back on fairly quickly, and then hopefully we should get some smoke.
At first, the smoke lingers around the head. This would be lethal for attacking troops. But then the wind picks it up.
The assumption is with something like this that it was projecting the smoke a considerable distance. Well, if you try blowing anything in air, you can't blow it more than probably about 10 feet at most. So really it was just a way of getting this stuff into the air and dispersing it. But I think that given the right kind of manoeuvrability of these turtle ships, it probably was a viable option. And what we have to remember is these guys were heavily outnumbered, and anything that would give them an advantage or that would save their culture and their civilization and their country was something that they would fight very hard to realise.
If the turtle ship captains had been able to position themselves upwind of the enemy, the poison gas could have been delivered without the Korean commanders killing their own troops. The use of toxic gas remained at the mercy of the wind until the delivery of gas by mortar in the trenches of World War I. From its lethal arsenal to the ramming potential of its spiked cladding, the turtle ship was a weapon capable of changing the tide of war. But Eastern Asia